There's this old movie plot that I love, and I think most men would probably say they like this too. It's this story, it's told time and time again, of an old grizzled warrior that in his youth he fought many a battle. He was victorious, he saved and sustained his people, he kept peace for all the lands. And now he's older, he's done fighting, he's trying to retire, and he's not looking for trouble, but trouble comes looking for him. And when trouble comes looking for him, he finds that he's got at least one more fight left in him. One more time to stand up for what's right, to show with bravery and courage that he can protect who he needs to protect. And somewhere along that, some Johnny Cash song plays in the background probably. I'm seeing now that movie stars that were action movie stars where I grew up in the 80s are now making this kind of movie. They're still a warrior. I've still got just a little bit of fight left in me. Now, why is it that this type of story resonates so much? That we continue to see it told time and time again. The names, the actors might change, but we continue to see that same story told time and time again. And I think it's that we would like to think, if we were to put ourselves in the shoes of the protagonist, that we too would do the right thing. We would like to think that we too would show courage, bravery, strength. We want peace. We certainly don't want to fight, but that we would like to think that we would do what was necessary when the time came. And because we want peace, we might question just what in our own lives might we have to do to get peace, to keep peace. We celebrate today, and we thank today those who have made so many sacrifices for our peace, the veterans. I've met many a soldier who they might get to see their children born, and then they're sent somewhere for months on end, maybe years on end, far, far away. And having seen that, and then I go inside and I have a nice meal with my family and the air conditioning and play games with my kids, and I'm reminded of how many soldiers are out in somewhere like Afghanistan, down, hidden somewhere eating an MRE, hoping they don't get shot at. How many people have done so many sacrificial things so that I can have the freedom to not have to do that, to be in my home with my family, and enjoy so many freedoms that we often take for granted. Now, considering the countless sacrifices, including sacrifices to your health. I don't know how much you realize that being a soldier can take a serious toll on your health. You push your body to the limits. Considering all the sacrifices, even lives lost, it should inspire us. Because Christian, we are on a battlefield too. When we sing Onward Christian Soldier, it's not only because it's a pretty song that sounds good, it's got a good rhythm to it, but it's because we are in a spiritual battle as well. It can be easy to forget that the devil and his minions, the demons, it can be easy to forget that they're constantly trying to entice us to sin, trying to pull us away from God. They are trying to cause within us fear, confusion, and anxiety. Sometimes the devil's tactics are so subtle. If we're sticking with our metaphor of being on the battlefield, it's like there's this line between us and the enemy. Sometimes the devil very sneakily sneaks into our camp. He starts setting up his tent, starts living amongst us. We don't even realize it. But then this year, the devil has marched in brazenly and been much more obvious. He demands ridiculous things of us, but then so many people let him make those demands and meet those demands. Now, if we look through history, we look at the ancient conquerors of old. What happened when a conqueror came in? It was was trying to take over. Well, the people might have had several different reactions. Some people, they fought off those who were trying to conquer them. Some people said, well, let's make a deal. We don't want to be completely subjugated, but let's try to make a deal with the one who's trying to conquer us. And then, of course, there were people that just opened the door wide and said, come on in. Come in and conquer us. We're sure this will work out fine. Well, I'm afraid that so often we're in a culture that instead of trying to fight off the devil is trying to fight to keep Jesus off the throne of our lives. Trying to empty that throne, and then the devil comes in and he's got this nice throne to sit on in our hearts. He's the one that Jesus called the prince of this world, the prince of the air. He comes in and he starts taking up residence. After we fought so hard to get Jesus off the throne in our hearts, we've made it easy for the devil to come in. He starts to take up residence and starts to give the marching orders for us now. Folks, we are certainly in a spiritual battle. And it's not just a spiritual battle for the pastor to fight. It's not only for people who have been Christian longer than you have. It's not only for people that you say, well, they're a better Christian than I am. I could never be a Christian as good as they are. No, this is a fight that we must all face. Are you going to let the enemy come into your camp? Will you try to strike a deal with him? Or will you say that, no, I don't bow the knee to anybody but my Lord Jesus Christ? Because we're all called to take a stand, even if it costs us. Even if we too have to make some sacrifices. And I think the sacrifices of our veterans should remind us that we might have to make some sacrifices too. You see, our veterans did not fight these physical battles so that we could refuse to do our part in the spiritual realm. God has used brave and sacrificial people to secure our religious freedom in this country. But He did not provide that for us so that we could be apathetic, so that we could reject Him. Now, sure, we have the legal right before mankind to do that, to reject God, to walk away from Him. We have the legal right to do that. But we do not have the right to do that before God. We do not have the right to reject God and then expect to be saved by Him and to go to heaven with Him, though we may have rejected Him. It's like that phrase I've been hearing a lot lately, that you are entitled to your own opinion but not your own facts. The fact is that God is calling all of us to prepare for a battle. And I think a good place for us to turn is in Psalm 144. Turning in Psalm 144, and we'll give you a second to turn there. Psalm 144, starting with the first verse. Praise be to the Lord, my rock, who trains my hands for war, my fingers for battle. So we start off this psalm knowing that it is God who trains us for this battle. Verse 2, He is my loving God and my fortress, my stronghold and my deliverer, my shield in whom I take refuge, who subdues people under me. So He is our refuge, He is our defense, He conquers the enemy. Now notice that we are still called to show up to the battle, that we have a role to play, that we take our marching orders not from the devil but from Jesus, who should be the one who sits on the throne in our heart. That we show up to the battle, but God ultimately wins the victory. David continues to pray to God through the psalm. He prays that God will scatter his enemies, to deliver him from evil. And look at what fighting means for David. What is the end that David has in mind through these battles? If we look down in verse 12. What does David want at the end of the day as he goes to the battlefield in the power of God? Then our sons in their youth will be like well-nurtured plants, and our daughters will be like pillars carved to adorn a palace. Our barns will be filled with every kind of provision. Our sheep will increase by thousands, by tens of thousands in our fields. Our oxen will draw heavy loads. There will be no breaching of walls, no going into captivity, no cry of distress in our streets. Blessed is the people of whom this is true. Blessed is the people whose God is the Lord. So what does David want as the outcome of this battle? He wants peace. He wants the children to prosper in safety. He wants the nation to not be plundered, to not be enslaved, something that Israel knew all too well. And he says that the people who rely upon God to be their Lord, that word that means the master, the one that's in charge of their life, the people who rely upon God to be their Lord and rely not on their own understanding, but rely on God, those people are blessed. God calls us all to the battle, but we look to our commander in the battle for our refuge, for our deliverance. We follow his orders. Now, there was this set of orders that God gave in Deuteronomy chapter 9, but they weren't completely followed. The people did a good job mostly in following these, but it was important that these orders be followed to the letter, and they weren't. Hear Israel. You are now about to cross the Jordan to go in and dispossess nations greater and stronger than you, with large cities that have walls up to the sky. The people are strong and tall, Anakites. You know about them and have heard it said, who can stand up against the Anakites? But be assured today that the Lord your God is the one who goes across ahead of you like a devouring fire. He will destroy them. He will subdue them before you, and you will drive them out and annihilate them quickly, as the Lord has promised you. So God makes it clear there's something for the people of God to do. There's something that God is going to do. He is going to do most of the work. And I picture almost if you were teaching a child how to bowl, and you, let's say you had your own kind of kit at home, and instead of putting the pins in a little triangle fashion, let's say you just put them all in one line. And you put your kit about a foot or two away from the bowling pins and handling the bowling ball and say, okay, I've lined it all up for you. I just need you to throw it. You just do it that way. And throw it and knock down all the pins. I've lined it up so perfectly for you. I just need you to knock down all the pins. But we see that Israel doesn't really knock down all the pins. It doesn't really try to, it looks like. Say, well, I want to keep a couple standing. I want to keep a couple things around. In Deuteronomy chapter 20, God explains why he said this. Why he says, I'm going to drive them out. I'm going to annihilate them I'm going to destroy them like a fire. You're going to annihilate them completely. I'm going to set everything up, and then you're going to destroy them. Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 16, he says, do not leave any of these people breathing. And in verse 18, he explains why. Otherwise, they will teach you to follow all the detestable things they do in worshiping their gods, and you will sin against the Lord your God. Now, when we get to Judges chapter 1, verse 27, we see what happened. Now, I'm going to read a portion of this to you. You should have the rest of this in your notes, but I'm just going to read a portion of this to you, and you're going to pick up on a pattern here. But Manasseh did not drive out the people of Bethshan or Tanakh or Dor or Eblim or Megiddo and their surrounding settlements, for the Canaanites were determined to live in that land. When Israel became strong, they pressed the Canaanites into forced labor, but never drove them out completely. Nor did Ephraim drive out the Canaanites living in Gezer, but the Canaanites continued to live there among them. Neither did Zebulun drive out the Canaanites living in Kitron or Nahalal, so these Canaanites lived among them. But Zebulun did subject them to forced labor. And I'm not going to read the entire passage, but it's a lot of the same. You read through this passage, Israel allowed these people that God said to annihilate. He said, we're going to let them stay. We're going to let them stick around. Even though God said, if you let them stay, they're going to influence you. They're going to lead you towards false gods, and you're going to sin against God. It's really important. I've lined up all the pins. I've lined it up for you. You just need to strike them down. You just need to annihilate them completely. Don't leave anyone standing. You see this pattern here. that God told his people, in some of the places you could take prisoners, but there's certain places that had to be destroyed completely. We have this long list of examples. They didn't destroy this. They didn't destroy this. They didn't destroy this. They allowed this to stay. They allowed that to stay. Let me ask you this morning, folks, is that your life? You've done pretty good by your own reckoning. You've managed to eliminate certain things out of your life. But some things maybe you've allowed to stay. Like those prisoners taken by Israel. You say, I've got a little control over these areas. They don't control me. It'll be okay. I'll just have a little bit of this. I'll just do a little bit of that. When God has told you to annihilate that from your life. Get rid of this thing in your life completely. Otherwise, it's going to drag you down. It's going to be an idol for you. It is going to make you sin against God. I think if we're honest, we all have had or do have stuff in our lives. We might even call it a little cutesy phrase. We say it's my guilty pleasure. Then we excuse it away. We say it's not wrong if I do this, but I only go this far. I can go down the road at least this far, when God didn't want that road open in the first place. He told you to put up the road closed sign. He knows that there are potholes and dangers ahead, but you're determined, oh, I'll just really drive safe. I can just circumvent that sign. I wonder how many of you have ever tried to drive around a road closed sign and how'd that work out for you? Find the bridges out. Do not let the enemy set up in your camp. Do not let him remain in your camp. Do not invite him in. Don't let him set up his tent because you think, well, I've got him surrounded. What's the worst he can do? Folks, I hope we've learned in 2020 never to say the phrase, what's the worst that can happen? It can't be that bad. Or maybe in exasperation you've said, oh, it can't get any worse than it got worse. Don't ever say that. Can we just make a pact this year that we're never going to say the phrase, it can't get any worse, or what's the worst that can happen? Because God will humble you. You'll find out. There's this old phrase that if you give the devil an inch, he'll become your ruler. And we've certainly seen that. We are called to annihilate him from the camp. That God has done all of the hard work. But we need to pray that if we see the devil out in our camp and he's putting up tent stakes, that we, with God's help, we yank those tent stakes right up out of the ground and say, you're not settling down here. I'm not allowing you a place in my heart to set up camp, to live here, to change the culture of the camp, to change my heart, my life. There's a throne here, and it's only got space for one person on it, and that's God. But I'm not letting the devil set up and try to lay claim to that. Now, we spoke about making sacrifices. Perhaps the sacrifice that you need to make today is to expel from your life that enemy. And maybe it's an enemy you've even grown fond of. Say, oh, I know the enemy's in my life and it shouldn't be, but man, I like his music. I like some of the stuff he makes. He's really entertaining. Sometimes even the enemy, he fills me with anger, fury, against people who don't see things the way I do, have different opinions than I do. Oh, I don't know, maybe politics, that'd be a good example, right? Timely example. During an election cycle. Say, maybe the devil fills me with anger and I feel like I have some kind of moral superiority over other people who think differently than me. No. Instead, be filled with the Holy Spirit. Because the enemy had been allowed to stay, because Israel had not driven them all away. When David became king, he had a lot of cleaning house to do. King David had to fight a lot of battles. And as we look through the Psalms, we see him talking about this. We know that it took a toll on him. We know you don't go through all of those battles without it changing a person. And maybe you can resonate with that and say, I've been through some battles, and it changed me. Some of these battles, David might have had to face either way. But of course, there were battles that essentially had been handed down to him. And that's not fair. You might have some battles in your own life that were not of your own making. Battles that were handed down to you as well. You inherited those. And it's not fair. Say, I didn't even do anything to earn these battles. They should have been cleared off the board before I ever got here. Someone else should have taken care of that. And it's not fair. But look at what David did and did not do. Did David sit around and complain about the mess that he had to deal with? Did he try to blame it on those who came before? Say, man, if it wasn't for that King Saul, if King Saul had just done his job, I'd had it different. Did he blame it on this person or that person? No. He fought hard to leave for his son and to leave for his people a legacy of peace. A hard-won peace. Because David knew firsthand that freedom is not free. We've already seen that we fight the good fight with God going before us, not in our own strength, but on his strength, and not willingly giving over territory to the enemy. But I want to share one more passage with you this morning from 2 Samuel chapter 23. This is a great passage that honors the nation's veterans. Starting with verse 8, we listen to these soldiers' stories. The passage in the Bible that it commends these veterans of the nation. And you'll see some patterns come up. These are the names of David's mighty warriors. Josheb-Basshebeth Tekemonite was chief of the three. He raised his spear against 800 men, whom he killed in one encounter. Next to him was Eleazar, son of Dodai the Ahorite. As one of the three mighty warriors, he was with David when they taunted the Philistines, gathered at Pas-Dammim for battle. Then the Israelites retreated. But Eleazar stood his ground and struck down the Philistines till his hand grew tired and froze to the sword. The Lord brought about a great victory that day. The troops returned to Eleazar, but only to strip the dead. Next to him was Shammah, son of Agee the Hararite. When the Philistines banded together at a place where there was a field full of lentils, Israel's troops fled from them. But Shammah took his stand in the middle of the field. He defended it and struck the Philistines down, and the Lord brought about a great victory. Christian, there's going to be times when you're going to feel like you're the only one on the battlefield. That's a theme that we see in each one of these. Other people fled, they ran away. There's going to be times when the devil tells you, run, get out of there. But God tells you, no, take a stand. Do what's right. Stand up for what you believe in. And you're going to feel like, I'm the only one on the battlefield. Everybody else ran away. But know that God is with you. You do not fight in your own strength. And I pray that you will perform the same spiritual heroism as you have seen the physical heroism displayed by our veterans. That you will stand for what's right. You will draw inspiration from examples like these of what it looks like to stand firm in God's power and be victorious in him. We return thanks to God, who can make us all heroes on our own spiritual battlefield. We are thankful to God for our members of the armed services, who have sacrificed so much to protect our freedoms. And out of gratitude and respect, might we annihilate the devil's strongholds in our lives. With God's help, standing firm on the promises of God. Now let us join together to praise his name as we sing this final song.